Hi and welcome back to my channel. My name is Carolina and today I would like to talk about the most common mistakes that we do when we sew and especially how to avoid them. In the beginning, of course, I would like to mention that even the experienced sewists make a lot of mistakes, and I feel like sewing in general is basically a learning process. But that's the thing about mistakes. We make them and we can fix them as well. And then for the future, once we learn, we won't make them again. So that's why knowing those mistakes and having that learning curve is gonna make your sewing experience so much better. I feel like this topic is so vast and it really depends on so many things, but I would like to start from beginnings of the beginnings. The first most common mistake, washing and pre-washing your fabrics, it's crucial. A lot of fabrics are gonna shrink. So if you're gonna make something in your own size and then you're gonna wash it, well, it's not gonna fit you anymore. And I made that mistake again and again and I couldn't figure it out why until I did the research and I found out that you need to pre-wash your fabrics. So hard lesson learned. Now I wash all of my fabrics before and I make sure that I follow a specific washing instructions for specific fabrics. And I feel like this is such an easy fix, but for some reason I was always skipping that step, being too lazy perhaps to wash my fabrics. Now I do it as soon as I get a fabric. I just put it straight to the washing machine and then once it's dry I iron it and put it on my shelf. And once I have this type of like routine, what I do when I get my new fabric, and it's super organized and I really love it. So I think this would be my mistake number one, which I think is very common. And then a mistake number two, not ironing while you sew. I think like this is like a deal breaker, especially for me. It's again the same principle as well. Like you feel like you're wasting your time, you don't want to get up from the machine and go to the board to iron the pieces, but then at the end you're not happy with the results. So what I usually do, because just like you, I don't like to change my place once I sew when I'm at the machine. I don't like to get up and do other things, like I want to be there and do all the stuff. So what I basically do, I work in parts. For example, if I do a sleeve, I'm gonna do all the steps for the sleeve and cuff, all the steps for the collar, all the steps for the front and back, and then move all my pieces to the sewing machine, do all the sewing there, and then take them all and then move it to the iron board and iron them all at the same time. Of course, if you're following like a tutorial or if you're not like beginner and you're not sure how to make clothes, I guess it's easier for you to make it like step by step and start with the sleeve, prepare the sleeves, then move to the front and the collar. Perhaps that's the easy way to begin with, but once you're up to the speed and you kind of understand of how garment making is and like how garments are constructed, I think it's so much easier to just do everything in bulk. So I think that's my advice number two, and easy mistake number two, to iron all of your pieces and open those seams and let all the fabric out. A third common mistake that I think happens to a lot of us, it's not properly cutting out the pattern pieces. I cannot even stress enough of how important that is, because of how you cut out your pattern pieces. This is how a garment is gonna look like. Basically, all of the pattern pieces, they're supposed to be placed at the exact 180-degree angle according to the grain line. And then if you move it slightly by a few degrees, the fabric's gonna have more stretch in that direction, therefore it won't look the same. I feel like some of the fabrics are more forgiving, so if you feel like working with cotton or linen, you won't see as much difference, but if you're working with satin, which is so delicate and so like flowy and so adaptive, I think that's where you see the most changes. It's a mistake that happens to me too, one too many times, especially when I'm doing a skirt. This is the crucial one. And then once you want to cut skirt on the bias, which is like the 90-degree when you place your pattern, this is the most important thing to pay attention to. If you have a rectangular table, that would have been perfect. If you have a pattern on your floor, perfect as well. And then you take the fabric and then you align the side of the fabric along to the table. So the two lines of the edge of the fabric and edge of the table are aligned all the way, and that you know that all of the pattern pieces that you're gonna place are gonna be perfectly aligned. Also, as you know, probably the pattern pieces, they have marks on them of the straight grain line. This is how you're supposed to place them on the fabric. Sewing should never be about rushing, should be about the pleasure of making it. You should enjoy all the steps, and trust me, once you do all of the steps, your garment is gonna look so good at the end and you're gonna enjoy wearing it more. It's gonna be by higher quality. Perhaps you sew a few pieces and you feel like it's not perfect, or like the print is mismatched, or the stitches are not perfect. It's all about evaluating your work and evaluating of what you want to achieve. So if you have a few pieces that you notice the same mistakes over and over, perhaps there's something to look into. Another very common mistake is stretching the fabric while you sew. We talked before about the grain line. So basically when the fabric is cut on the grain line, in that position, this is where it's going to stretch the least. That direction and that direction, so horizontal and vertical. And some of the fabrics, of course, they are stretchy. When you, for example, do the curves of the armholes and you have the curved edges, as you can imagine them going over here, and then you're on a sewing machine, then this area is the most vulnerable. So if you're gonna stretch that fabric, you remember when we talked about the bias and how the fabric is super stretchy? This is the area that's going to stretch the most. So if you're on a sewing machine and then you stretch it too much, your armholes are going to look too big. So depending on the fabric, and I think it works to most of them, not supposed to push the fabric or pull the fabric, just let the fabric run through the machine smoothly without barely touching it. All you want to do is just guide it. It's a guide to make the stitch correctly, but never push it or pull it unless you intend to. And this mistake kind of follows into the next mistake that I would like to talk about, and it's not pinning the pieces. Probably you do it as well. When you have two pieces to be sewed together, you just take them to machine, you just put them together, and then you run it through. And then sometimes at the end you feel like the ends are mismatched and you're very confused. Why is that? Well, it's because it's very important to pin your pieces before you start sewing. It's very crucial, especially in the pieces like we talked about armholes. Those are the most important areas. And then once you pin it, you run the machine through it and then make sure that all of the notches are aligned. Let's take, for example, a princess seam. A princess seam has the two panels going from middle of the arm through the bust down to the waist. And then those two panels, when you look at them, perhaps they wouldn't look like they're the same, but it's very crucial that you pin them before, otherwise you're going to end up with one panel longer than the other. It also happens with the sleeves as well. So once you pin them together and once you sew them together and it has a little bit of creases, you always can iron them, but those pieces have to match. So don't forget this step and always pin down your pieces, and trust me, at the end it's going to save you a lot of time to unpick, to undo, and you're just going to move faster with your project. So pin down your projects. Another very common mistake is not choosing proper thread and needles for your project. It happened to me many times that I would stitch something on my machine and then the stitch would break. And I found it a little bit tricky to answer in one question what could be the reason, because it could be a sewing machine. It could be that your needle is not sharp enough and you just have to change it. It could be the thread that you're using. There's so many components to go into that, and I think the easier one would be just do a test on your sewing machine and see what fits for you the most. I used to have a sewing machine which was very old, and all of the stitches that I was doing, they were breaking right after. It doesn't matter if there was like cotton or linen, non-stretchy material, they would just snap as soon as I wore them. And for that, I feel like I have no answer, because I feel like I tried everything. I tried different type of needles, I tried different type of threads, and nothing worked on that machine until I switched my machines. Until I switched to this one that I have for, well, I don't even know how many years, but quite a lot. And ever since then, none of my stitches, they snap. Another common mistake that I find is not choosing the right fabric for your project. Choosing your fabric accordingly to your project. I cannot stress how important that point is, because that's how your project is going to look like. If you want to make a cowl neck or something flowy and you're going to use cotton, well, it won't work, let me tell you that. And vice versa. If you want to make a jacket and you want to make it out of silk, it might not turn out as beautiful as it would with some textured fabric. I think it's very important to adapt the project to your fabric or your fabric to your project. It depends. I think sometimes we are very stuck on which fabric we want to use, and then we have a vision in mind. It's okay to change it or pick a different fabric. And I feel like there's so many YouTube videos telling you which fabrics to use, but then we still make those really common mistakes of not picking the right fabric. So I'm asking myself, where does the issue lies? And I think it comes down to something really basic. If you want to make a jacket, you need something structured. If you want to make a blouse that's going to adapt with your body, you need to use a fabric that's going to be very liquid and play it with it as well and show all the features. You cannot make a cowl neck top with a structured fabric unless this is what you're looking for, but most of the times It is not. But it also is very important where you buy your fabric. If you buy them online, I know how difficult it is as well, because we don't see the fabric of how see-through it is, and then it arrives and you make trousers and they are see-through. Well then, if the fabric arrives and it's see-through and you wanted to make a trousers, don't make the trousers. Make a skirt with a lining and use the same fabric to make the lining. You know, like, adapt your project according to the fabric that you have, not other way around. Another common mistake that is very easy to fix is to have properly sharp scissors. It's very simple. It's very simple. When you cut the pattern piece and when you cut your fabric, especially when you're working with silk or satin, the way you cut it, the fabric is gonna slip through the scissors. So that's why sharp scissors are gonna change so much, and those clean edges are gonna make your project run so much smoother. I promise you. All you need to do is just have sharper scissors. I have probably like 6 or 7 pairs of scissors, and I got this one on Amazon. It's a very popular brand, but when I noticed that one of the points is not sharp enough, so when I was putting it under the silk fabric, it was cutting the fabric under the scissors, making it so annoying to cut, and they just got bad. So I replaced it with my new scissors, which look exactly the same, which is not super confusing at all. Having sharp scissors is just as important as hairdresser that you go to have a sharp scissors to cut your hair. Another very common mistake and very easy fix is not caring how your garment looks on the inside. There are so many ways to finish the garment, and I have many patterns, many examples that you don't really need to use an overlocker or serger machine. You only use a sewing machine. As for example, the Josephine bag that just came out recently, or Darlene dress. You don't need overlocker to make these dresses, and what I can suggest to you is always look into sewing techniques on what to do. My, I think, top few advices would be to, for example, change to a French seam rather than the normal seam. It's when you put the 2 stitches together, then cut the end of the fabric, and then you roll it over and you stitch again, and then you kind of sandwich the raw seam inside of that seam. So that's one fix. And then you can also bind the seam allowance, which I know it takes time, but then at the end of the day your garment is gonna look so good. Taking time, that extra time to do your garment, is gonna go a really long way. I can even see for myself that most of the pieces that I've made that haven't been with such a good quality, I'm not wearing them as often, or they just break. And then pieces that I spend time and patience to make, I wear them all the time. And I think we all have to remember that sewing is supposed to be fun. It's a hobby. So let's make it a pleasurable work by doing all the steps and putting extra time. And if you don't have that time that day to make something, don't stress. Perhaps just wash the fabric, press it so it's ready for the next day, prepare your scissors, prepare everything, so the next day you can come in with your headphones and your music and your coffee, and you can start your project and finish it in a day. I can tell you from my own experience, because I make a lot of clothes, that none of them they turn out good when I was in a rush. So I think the main mistake is just to plan also ahead. We don't leave enough time to finish, or to wash the fabric before, or to iron. We don't leave enough time to do those things. Therefore, we rushed through the whole project, and then at the end, we're not happy with the results. And time planning is gonna go a really far way as well. Those will be my most common mistakes and easy fixes according to me. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to check out my sewing patterns, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!